kind of hard for us to take.
Bob Simon, what about this? We know from our trips into Baghdad, in fact, one of the eeriest and scariest things about being in Baghdad, people such as Abu Nudal and other terrorist killers, murderers, sort of made Baghdad a center of coming and going in recent weeks and months. And Saddam Hussein does, at least hypothetically, have the capacity to strike back with any number of terrorist moves.
That is, if Saddam Hussein remains in power very long, if he is still in a position to direct these terrorist groups. It doesn't take long in the Arab world for a leader to lose respect, to lose his followers. We are not in a position now to confirm things that the Pentagon has been reporting. We are not in Iraq. We don't know whether the Iraqi Air Force has been destroyed. We cannot tell whether the Republican Guards have been decimated. What we are in a position to know, Dan, what we can report now, is not so much what happened, but what has not happened, and that's terribly important. We are standing here in the largest Saudi air base in eastern Saudi Arabia, Saudi American Air Base. We know that this base has not been hit. We have talked to our colleagues at the largest American air base in all of Saudi Arabia, which is near Riyadh. We know that that air base has not been hit. We've been talking to Tom Fenton in Israel. We know that nothing has gone towards Israel. We know that some artillery shells have landed in or near a Saudi refinery or some kind of Saudi oil installation near the border at Khafji. This is what we know has not happened. So far, Saddam Hussein has not been able to do the things he promised to do. He promised to hit Israel. He promised to hit the Saudi refineries. He's not been able to do it, and his capacity to do these things will diminish. My sense is that if he was going to do these things, he would have done it while he still had the possibility, which would have been in the opening hours. He hasn't done it now. I think we have reason to begin to feel a little bit safer.
Let's go to CBS News correspondent Bob Schieffer, who covered the war in Vietnam, and General George Christ, who until not too long ago commanded all U.S. forces in the Persian Gulf. He's now a retired U.S. Marine general and our CBS News military consultant. Gentlemen, what are the most important things for us to know, and what about these reports that the Apache helicopters attacked across the Kuwaiti-Saudi Arabian border?
I think that's one of the most interesting reports that we've had thus far, because obviously most of the damage that we've been talking about tonight, General Christ, has been damage inflicted on Baghdad. Obviously, if Apache helicopters are attacking, that is a short-range weapon, right. And so there must be something going on in Kuwait. What do you make of that, General?
Well, Bob, while we've been focusing on Iraq, clearly there has been a rather large strike go in on Kuwait itself. Now, the Apache helicopter, the range of the missile, the Hellfire missile, is only 3 miles. That means that those Apache helicopters were working over these frontline troops. There's also reports that the Marine F-A-18, the big attack aircraft, took off in a large package. It would appear that those were also headed here, meaning that not only were we going after strategic targets, but we're starting to work over the tactical targets in the Kuwaiti area.
Well, it sounds to me like you're saying that we're starting to attack the troops on the ground, even as this massive attack on military targets, refineries, missile sites, and so forth was underway. Is that what you're saying, General?
Clearly so. Clearly so. They're going after the troops. They must be going after the tanks, because the primary weapon on the Apache is an anti-tank weapon. The F-A-18, that is the Marine aircraft, carries both rockets and bombs, which are useful against any of the kinds of positions that those troops would be in, their tanks, artillery, and even headquarters.
Now, there was also a report of some Wild Weasel aircraft. Exactly what is a Wild Weasel?
Right, the Wild Weasel is an F-4G. Now, what this thing is, it goes in against radars, enemy air defenses. It jams the radar, and then it has a couple kinds of missiles that go right in and blow up the radar.
And one other thing, Dan, we have also picked up, British authorities are now reporting that all of the fighter planes that they sent over Iraq have now returned to their bases safely. We don't know how many that involved, but the British report that all of them have returned to base safely.
Thanks, Bob and General. CBS News coverage of the Persian Gulf War continues.
You are watching CBS News' continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, Here is Dan Rather.
Early reports indicate that the U.S. Air Armada, which has attacked Iraqi forces inside Iraq and inside Kuwait, the early indications are that the early raids were in the first hours of this Persian Gulf War, which may or may not last very long, have been remarkably successful. Now, those are censored reports. They are reports only from official sources. We have very few eyewitness reports, but that is the early indication. If there have been any casualties, they have not been reported. We're going to try to get up CBS News correspondent Alan Pizzi in Baghdad. Alan, are you there?
Alan, go. This is Alan Pizzi in Baghdad. The streets of Baghdad are almost deserted today, only a few cars making their way around. And the acrid pall of smoke and the heavy smell of explosions and fire that hung in the air last night is dissipating in the early morning light. Last night was quite unbelievable. The first sounds we heard were approximately 2:32 local time, when there was a kind of a roaring sound. It was hard to determine whether it was firing going into the air or something going over. And then the sky all around our hotel just lit up. Anti-aircraft fire, rockets, what appeared to be SAM-7 missiles. It went on for, it's hard to say, perhaps an hour. During the course of it, after about halfway through, we started hearing large explosions. There were some huge flashes. We were speculating that they'd hit a tower that we could see. Someone said the oil refinery went up. But I've heard from a taxi driver this morning who lives near the oil refinery that it was not hit. I'm at the U.S. Embassy at the moment, which of course is basically deserted. There was a missile strike near here, according to the local staff, but they say no one was hurt. The Iraqis kept up the firing all night. We were herded by hotel staff and security guards and what we call minders down into a basement shelter, deep in the basement of the Rashid Hotel. It seemed like a reasonable thing to do since none of us had phone lines. The phones went dead within the first half an hour, and that was the end of that. They're still dead at the hotel. It was impossible to say how much damage was inflicted. Certainly there was a tremendous amount of noise, a lot of concussions, huge flashes. But this morning, Baghdad radio has been playing the national anthem and reading verses from the Quran, and Iraqis are saying, "Hello, how are you? Is everything fine?" They seem to be unfazed by this. Mind you, we haven't seen a lot of the civilian population. Early this morning, as I cruised through the misty streets, there were a lot of soldiers with kit bags making their way to who knows where, trying to hail any car that went by. There were no buses and very few taxis. I did see a few broken windows, but that could have been from almost anything. In the central area, in the business district, and the residential areas that I drove through, I saw no signs whatsoever of damage. It's not clear at the moment what's going to happen to, for example, the scores of journalists trapped here. We had all been making plans last night to leave. We had tip-offs from our news organizations that we should be making our way down the road. We were rather hoping to be on a charter plane to Amman, Jordan this morning. Now we don't know what they're going to do. And neither does anyone else in Baghdad, so I suppose the situation's equal.
Alan, can you tell us any more about when the air attacks were at their height, what it was like, what you saw, what you heard?
What I saw were a lot of flashes, most of them going up into the air, tracer rounds from anti-aircraft guns, which have been situated on all the strategic buildings, situated down in parks and wooded areas. We saw rockets going up for what I believe were SAM-7s. I've heard that sound before, went over the hotel. There was a lot of small arms fire, and a lot of heavy concussions, roaring noises in the air. But you could see huge flashes from time to time, and one of my colleagues, Nick Swallow, said it saw a huge ball of fire roll up into the sky. But we could not tell what was hit because it was pitch black. The city was blacked out very, very quickly. The hotel was blacked out, and when it got to be going fairly well, we went down into the basement shelters. I wasn't so worried about being hit from bombs as I was from the anti-aircraft gunners who were firing just absolutely wildly. I was in Tripoli, Libya, when the Americans came in, and it was much the same sensation. A tremendous amount of fire, flashes, light, but no obvious targets. You didn't know where anybody was. If there were attack bombers coming in there, we didn't see them. We didn't really hear them. And I doubt that the gunners heard or saw them either. They were just blazing.